I wrote my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, on a 20th century French philosopher named Georges Bataille. The title of it was Bataille's Moral Summit, the communication between lacerated beings. Sorry why I lower this volume. Forgot about music in the background for the last few uploads, so I'm trying to bring that back. Anyway, the basic idea of Bataille that appealed to me was that our truth is a kind of continuity and interconnectedness between human beings, between all beings in the universe, but that various factors, things like capitalism, for example, the general structure of our reason, the way we make tools of things, the structure of perception, these things isolate us, create this, kind of Cartesian. Rene Descartes, 17th century French philosopher, famous for saying, "I think, therefore I am." This Cartesian separation of the subject of consciousness, yourself, and the world. And so we become isolated, and we end up using the world and other people as mere tools, as opposed to recognizing our truth of interconnectedness. So Bataille's solution to this problem was through excess, through violent expenditures, where you would destroy the self. You would literally self-destruct. This could include, there was a quote that I used to use regularly from his book Guilty, where he says, "Your unhappy philosopher needs a drink, like your working man needs soap. You get dirty by working, just like you get sober by doing philosophy." So I use that as a justification for my own reckless behavior, trying to get rid of my sobriety through intoxication of various forms, to, again, literally self-destruct to connect. But as I recognized, and I knew deep down inside, probably on some level, but it became so clear to me recently, thanks to my meditation experience, that this is just false. Because what happens after these expenditures is that the ego just reemerges in even stronger shape. You end up feeding the ego with these substances. Have you ever seen someone on cocaine? I mean, they think he or she is Superman, especially if that person is kind of insecure to begin with. Cocaine gives them this kind of monstrous ego where they feel like they can do anything. And so this life of expenditure ultimately is counterproductive, just doesn't work. I mean, I made a Freudian slip there. I was about to call him Nietzsche, because Bataille thought of himself as a devotee of Nietzsche, and for good reason. I mean, I think what Bataille saw in Nietzsche was this isolated, godlike individual on the heights who desperately wanted to connect, but couldn't overcome what Nietzsche calls in his Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his pity for the last man. And Bataille wanted to kind of help Nietzsche, you might say, as an upgrade in the 20th century, to find that connection that was lacking, that isolated that Nietzschean God on the mountaintop. But like I said, it ultimately doesn't work out. Now, when I used to try to teach Bataille, until I got too frustrated with my students not getting it, he was too near and dear to me for me to end up teaching him and have students not appreciate it. But when I did try to talk about Bataille, I often invoked the movie Fight Club to give you a sense of what Bataille is about. In fact, that movie, when it first came out, man, time flies. I guess it was like 1999 or something, 15 years ago. But my dissertation advisor from Penn State, Alfonso Lingus, who's pretty well known, Lingus told me that he thought Fight Club was the most Nietzschean movie ever made. And I would say, it's more Bataillean than Nietzschean because of that, as I described, this need for kind of violence to break out of the self. For Nietzsche, it's all about kind of an assertion of power, sovereign power. But for Bataille, there's the kind of self-destructive element, I think, that's not there in Nietzsche. Anyway, when I try to describe Bataille to my students using Fight Club, the way I described it sometimes was that Fight Club or Bataille, and I kind of use them interchangeably. Basically, it's like Buddhism on crack. Right? Buddhists also recognize our fundamental continuity, our interconnectedness, what's really important, the truth, the Dhamma. But instead of actively, violently trying to accomplish this. Buddhists kind of, or at least the way I thought of it before, was passively, through meditation, allow an individual to feel that connection. But this was a kind of fundamental misconception on my part about Buddhism. Like I mentioned in previous posts, I think I thought I understood Buddhism theoretically, but understanding Buddhism theoretically is similar to understanding swimming theoretically. It means nothing. You need to actually do it. You need to practice. You need to do the meditation in order to see that truth. You know what? So this it's a false kind of comparison to talk about Bataille as Buddhism on crack, because Buddhism on crack is no longer Buddhism. You know, and really it's not about, as I thought before, a kind of passive recognition of our interconnectedness. Buddhism, you know, maybe there are a few privileged individuals who are so Zen-like in their nature that they can kind of passively connect to the universe. You know, sometimes in my classes, one thing I said that I still hold to some extent is I thought of Buddhism and Taoism as kind of the yin and the yang, or at least complementary in certain respects. In that Taoism, you know, is a kind of nature mysticism in my interpretation, where you are able to, like, kind of this hippy dippy tree hugging attitude, where you can passively, you know, smoke a bowl and just listen to the birds and smell the leaves and feel the wind and just be one with nature. Buddhists do appreciate all that, and they want to reach the same destination. But the way I explain this to my students is that for Buddhists, it wasn't a matter of passively letting this happen. You know, so there's some contradictions here, because I talked about Buddhism both as passive and active. But anyway, you know, I guess it's relative, because it's passive in relation to Bataille, but active in relation to Taoism. But with Buddhism, there was more an active approach through meditation, as opposed to Taoism. And like I said, maybe some people are so privileged or have generated such good karma from the past that they're able to just passively connect with things. But I think for the vast majority of us, and really for all of us, that selfishness that separates us from the world is so ingrained, is so part of our animal nature, that and on top of that, here comes this part in Mozart that just moves me. But that selfishness is so reinforced by childhood experiences, these deep impressions, especially made through our relationships with our parents, that it's not easy. It's not really possible to just passively let go and be one with things. You got to work, and by work I mean meditate, to train your body, to have your body understand what your mind is in its nature. And really, this separation between mind and body, it's hard to articulate. I tried to in a paper that I wrote, but it's false in the first place. That's what Buddhists realize, that your body is an extension of your mind, but it forgets that through these selfish experiences that separate us. So it needs to be reminded through this practice, you know. And it's very hard, because I think human nature is selfish at its core. I mean, this is something Schopenhauer harps on over and over, that you know. And one thing I thought of recently is that, you know, one of the real appeals of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, is that it basically has this figure of God as the ultimate superego. And it's not an accident that Freud labeled this the superego. We have an ego that we develop in the course of our early childhood, and then but it needs a sense of protection. It realizes it's alone and helpless, and that, you know, and as we get older, you realize you're going to die, you know, and so you want a protector. And so psychologically, we're prone to want this superego watching over us and protecting us, this God the Father. But that's still a function of egoism. You know, we want our ego to go on no matter what and be protected. And what the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, realized is that the ego is ultimately false and is the source of all this misery. And if we just learned to tame the ego to the point where we can actually dissolve it through meditation, the world would be a so much better place. All right. Thanks. Bye.